Welcome to this instructional video about the art of storytelling. This is all about understanding plot and plot elements. So, what is plot? Well, plot is the sequence of events that makes up any story. Plots are part of stories that are told, like verbally. They're part of stories that are written, like short stories and novels and dramas. They are part of stories that are filmed, like television and movies, and they are part of things that are sung, as in your music. Yes, everything you are exposed to pretty much when it comes to reading, talking, watching, listening, all have some element of plot structure. Plot is simply how the story develops, unfolds, and moves in time. It has 5 elements to it, and we're going to talk about each one of them. And you can use a plot diagram to help you visualize structure. This is a plot diagram. You can see it kind of looks like a mountain. It has a base, it moves up to a peak, and then it comes back down. Plot is the sequence of events that make up the story, and there are 5, like I said, 5 essential elements. They are exposition, rising action, a climax, falling action, and a resolution, also called a denouement. Each element of plot contributes to the overall structure and meaning of a story. So let's talk about each of these elements one by one. Exposition, what is it? Well, the exposition is the beginning of your story. This is where you get introduced to your main characters, your main setting, and the main conflict or conflicts. It helps to set the stage for the plot to unfold. So the exposition really is just the beginning of any story that starts to set things up. That story begins to develop with your rising action. This is where your events or instances that relate details about a character or character's actions, details, and decisions, and all background information. So like I said, you get introduced to people and you get introduced to situations in the exposition, and then those begin to develop in the rising action. So the rising action helps to build tension. It helps to build the conflict that will eventually lead up to what's called the climax. The rising action is the arc of events that keeps us engaged and connected with our characters. This is where we learn to actually care for characters or not care for characters. It's where we start to question motives and question decisions, question friendships, things like that. Then we hit our climax. This is the turning point of the story where your main character faces their greatest conflict. It's often the place where some kind of major change happens, and it's really the peak of the story, often the most exciting part of the plot. So when you get to the climax, this is where everything kind of unfolds. All those things that have been building up, and then all of a sudden something happens and there's a big change in events that turns the story from what it was to where it's going. Once you hit your climax, you then begin to have what's called falling action. Your falling action is the part of the story after the climax that leads you from that turning point to its final conclusion. It shows how the conflict is being resolved, and it begins to tie up any loose ends that there may be within the story. Finally, you get to your resolution. Your resolution is the ending of the story. It's generally where the conflict is resolved and you're given some sense of closure. Even in stories that don't have a true conclusion where they end sort of open-ended, They are still giving some conclusion and some sense of closure, just they're expecting that you're making inferences to kind of come to your own conclusion of things. But they tie up enough that you can come to your own kind of resolution. The falling action and the resolution are really crucial to a well-crafted plot because they bring that closure. And we need closure at the end of any story. So that's been Plot and Plot Elements. Thank you for being on this learning journey with me. And now you should be able to identify plot structure in everything you read and watch, because like I said at the very beginning, plot is in every single story.